Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing today? So, as you can see, Coop is missing today, so it'll just be the three of us. A little bit more of a cozy, intimate session, but a very exciting topic. User behavior is something that is, of course, very interesting when it comes to the topic of gaming, but even just Web3 in general, because when you add this type of decentralized financial system to regular applications, you're opening up a lot of new windows for user onboarding, and of course, you're impacting their behavior in so many different ways. So it's great to have these two gentlemen joining me on the panel today. Maybe Leo and Chris, do you want to introduce yourselves first before we get started?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Anthony. And this is Leo, CGO of Carve. And in Carve, we are building a modular data layer for gaming and for AI. And super happy to have this chance to share the understanding about the users' behavior between Web2 and Web3.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mirror World. And we're building a SVM gaming chain, so on top of Solana, called Sonic SVM. So also, thanks for the invitation, Anthony, and everybody here. Appreciate the time and excited to share more.
Yeah, so I think we should have some pretty diverse perspectives, especially because me representing a game, Leo representing more of a user acquisition platform and user data platform, and Chris representing a chain now. Hopefully we can provide some pretty interesting insights on how we view user behavior in the industry. So I have these these cue cards, but I think maybe we'll just kind of wing it as we go, and we'll just freestyle it. I want to get your thoughts on the main difference that you notice in the onboarding process between Web 2 and Web 3. So yeah, keep it very broad.
Yeah. For me, if we talk about the main difference, I would say because the behavior is decided by the user's motivation, and I see there is a strong difference of the motivation from Web 2 and Web 3 users. For Web 2 users, as I come from the traditional gaming backgrounds, we did a lot of research about motivate the users to play the game in the global markets. And the top two motivations are always play PvP games to win the match and then play with friends. That's the main motivation. It's even from region to regions. For Asia, it's more concentrated in the top two motivations. But it's in Western countries, the user motivation is more divided into collecting the achievements and also feel the immersive to be in the game and extra. But PvP and social is the main motivation. And that explains why in Web2 world, the games with the largest DAU in the world is the multiplayer PvP game. Right? But for Web3, as we did research in Carve, and of course the top motivation is to play and earn the money. And after that is to have the PvP and also collect the in-game assets and achievements. And the social is not one of the top users' motivation in Web3 world. So the motivation difference decide what is the behavior difference in Web2 and Web3, especially in the onboarding process. For Web2, we have to make the user's onboarding process as simple as possible and to polish each step to make it more accessible for the users. For example, when I do my previous game to the global publishing, we say that the data retention is only 50%, and 30% of the users they lost during the onboarding process. We have to do is to check the step-by-step users' loss rate, and to make sure that each step is very smooth for the users, to treat the users like they are babies. If there's anything they can understand, it's not their fault, it's our fault. This is how we do the Web2 global games. But in Web3, it's the users have very strong motivations to learn the game and to conquer the difficulties in the game. For some of the games, because in Carve we have onboarded over 350 Web3 games, some of the games, even they are good games, but the current stage, the user experience is not good enough. But the users, they can really spend a lot of time learning how to play the game and sharing the tutorials in the communities. Some of the tutorials sharing in the communities is even better than the official tutorials. We will not say Web3 gamers are more clever than Web2, but it's they have more knowledge and motivations to conquer the difficulties in the games and to spend time to learn.
So a little bit of a different perspective here, and I appreciate that 100% once we think about the motivation from a monetary perspective. We have a lot stronger motivation to conquer the game. I guess that's the same in the very early days when gaming itself is more of a niche sport or a niche activity where if you go back to the Game Boy days and the GBA Advanced days, right? The amount of tutorials and the complexity of getting through Pokemon, for example, is significantly more complex than the current days. So I think there's still that core group. It's just that for us right now, we only have the core group. So that being said, like everything that we think about is how do we onboard, the core group of people and have their attention on the games that we're publishing or we're going to market with for the Sonic chain, which is a Solana-based gaming chain. So we very naturally, and I think we're going to talk about this a little bit as well, we naturally have to adhere to the behavioral statistics of the Solana DGen users as well. What do they care about? They care about the user experience, they care about the speed, but they also care about the entertainment value, which is at the core what we're trading on in this industry. Every single token, in my perspective, is a meme, right? It is all about whether our attention is on this meme or not. So as a chain, our essentially primary focus is to always generate these really fun, interesting assets that can capture everyone's attention. And that is the core of our go-to-market. However, there's different approach to that where, Immutable X, for example, has like 200 different games. And there's only a few that captures your attention, but the chain itself captures more through its ecosystem. While something like Ronin only has 6 or 7 different games. And once in a while, there's this one with really high quality and high traffic that just gets everyone to play that game, like Pixels or Axie Infinity in the last cycle. So I think those are two completely different models on how you onboard games as the infrastructure behind it. But ultimately, we are creating assets that is capturing attention. Everyone can create assets on top of our infrastructure layer. So we're capturing the entertainment value and using that to attract users to our chain. So that's why being fun still matters. But really, we are using both token prices as well as the product itself to capture attention.
100%. And it's so interesting that you mentioned Immutable because basically Immutable and Gunzilla Games take a completely opposite approach to ecosystem building because Immutable is, they're investing in, I think they have 300 projects in the ecosystem almost. And Gunzi has one game that they've been building for 5 years, right? And so when you look at the types of users that are looking at Gunzilla Games and Gunzi, these are people who truly believe in like the game and the fun first, right? And they believe in the participation in the game in order to actually foster any sort of monetary like earnings later. So Gunzilla's really taken the approach of build a good game first and then bring the economy into it or introduce it a little bit later. So that's something that you'll notice kind of in our marketing materials and everything like that. Jerry, the CIO of Gunzilla Games, was on stage earlier talking about user behavior once their mind is actually focused on earning rather than enjoying the gaming experience. And he referenced a study based on parents that were, I don't know if you guys were here earlier, a study on parents that were late picking up their kids from school. And the second that they actually charged a fee for that, the lateness actually increased. So the parents actually realized that they could exchange their time for money, and they lost the intrinsic value of being on time picking up their kids with just like a fee that they could pay. So I think, what I look at is like, how do you strike the balance between the monetization and the value of the assets and that side of things and the fun of the games? Because, there are always going to be guilds and a lot of people that are onboarded just for that kind of that financial system, right? Obviously, you mentioned Ronin and Axie obviously created a whole new job economy, right? Guilds with some guilds have 100,000 people just farming tokens, right? So it's always interesting to balance that user base versus the users that actually want to play the game. But anyway, I digress. I think I want to just point out something that you said, Leo, about friction. Before we get into kind of the ecosystem stuff, what are your views on Web3 user fiction and the differences between kind of Web2 onboarding and Web3 in that regard?
Fiction means like the users onboarding, if there's any like.
Yeah, like let's say like account abstraction, these types of things that might help improve Web3 onboarding, for example.
Yeah, I think for now it's like for Web3 games, I see there are a lot of good games that actually the core gameplay is good, but it's like it's not well polished. Because like for the game developers, they are not like doing the how to say the check of the data step by step for the games, just like what Web2 global company is doing right now. It's like if there's any points that there's a large amount of users, they stop there, or maybe they spend a lot of time to conquer that block at that stage. So these games need to be polished like step by step to make the user's experience smooth. And also, because for gaming industry, it has already been like 30 years, so in every genre, there is like, we could say it's the right method to do SLG game or a right method to do like mobile game. So maybe it can take more references from the mature Web2 games and to see like how the user experience can be like easier for the users to understand. So also I totally agree about what Chris just said about for industries like starting from core users at the early stage. And if this really want to have the mass adoption, the user experience have to be good. But for Web3 games, it's not at this stage right now, but it's going to be.
Agreed. Chris, I mean, you're speaking from a chain perspective, and you did mention that you are paying extra attention to the user experience and the assets. So what are your thoughts on, from like a chain perspective, like how do you create that? How do you offer a platform where your developers, your game builders are getting the best user onboarding experience possible? So is there any sort of tooling that you're building or anything like that?
Yeah, so for those who don't know or already know our background, Mirror World started around 2 years ago, and we've onboarded over 50 different Web3 games across multiple chains. Right, we worked with Base, Arbitrum, ZK Sync, Solana, Sui, such and so forth. And we have built a very complete set of tools that focuses on the account abstraction, custodial wallets, authentication schema, and stuff like that. So I would say those are the software, on top of your hardware that you have to kind of build out, which is the chain. And that performance issue really needs to be solved to the T, right? And I think we've seen a very recent rise in, for example, our native base, which is Solana. And the number of meme coins on Solana that have kind of caused a lot of congestion issues for the chain. So we have to help solve that scaling issue first, and then go up a layer and get all of the wallet authentication and all of those things down. The very different approach that we take is that we have all of these tools ready to go, but we never want to force or facilitate these games to pick our toolkits as opposed to building our own, because there are very specific needs for every single different type of game. So we have these tools available for use, but you're free to build out your own experience. So I would say that we right now are focusing on the scaling solution, which we call Hypergrid, that scales Solana first and foremost. And then we build the on-chain transaction and the frameworks on top of that Hypergrid. So we have a native developer experience for any game developer that wants to come to Solana and build a game very specifically. So a little bit, a different approach than some of the other gaming chains for sure.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's talk about ecosystems and I guess how each ecosystem might have its own kind of personality. I mean, I think we've all kind of worked with like several different ecosystems, and we know that each of them has their own personality, and so do their users. So what has your experience been observing some of the different ecosystems and how their users kind of behave, especially when it comes to gaming? So for example, like I worked with the Sui Foundation last year, and the Sui ecosystem was very focused on highlighting games that leveraged like a lot of the value propositions of the chain, right? But they also built products like ZK Login, which allows for basically one-click user onboarding and things of that nature. The users seem to be very, very focused on the potential of the chain itself. And so a lot of those users actually stayed in the ecosystem for the potential of the games that could be brought on, rather than some of the existing games, at least early on. Now we see a lot of really cool games on Sui, obviously, but what has your experience been like looking at ecosystems and how their users kind of, view, how their users behave, I guess?
Sure. We worked with, so we onboarded probably 18 chains for our abstraction layer and all of the aggregation that we built, the on-ramp, the omni-chain swaps, and stuff like that. And we decided to come back and focus on Solana as our home base. And one of the biggest reason is that there is such a native group of degens that is willing to try everything, right? Like they are willing to go to your game and start playing it and look at the assets, look at the game from a very idealistic and long-term perspective, believe it or not, right? Because of some of the historical events that happened on Solana, they basically got in at the lowest point, got pumped 100 times because of FTX, became loyal fans of the chain, and then got dumped 90%. So like the amount of that variation and volatility between the bottom and the top is the highest for Solana as a chain. And it's very, very hard for any other ecosystem to duplicate that type of loyalty. And these people, made it all back in one trade, so to speak, right? So when you have users like that, they are contributing and giving feedback to every single product on the ecosystem. They will play anything from Star Alice to something like Aurora, regardless of the game type that they're playing. As opposed to something like Sui, for example, there could be very new users getting onboarded to Sui through the ZK login that you were talking about and the dynamic NFTs, which they advocate a lot for as well. These users are first and foremost caring about the game and the type of game that you might play. So a recent example of a game that transferred to Solana and got instant price action because everybody just tried it was Parallel, right? Parallel was Polygon paradigm led last cycle. I got destroyed on the price action there. And then it came to Solana in 3 months, there's a 10 times price action. So for a lot of players, a lot of players in Solana, they're looking for every single asset and just degenning every single token. And I think that's what makes our ecosystem really great. And I want to, emphasize a little bit there. But Leo, go ahead.
Yeah, and just want to add a little bit on this. Like for car, we have integrated with 42 chains and has collaborated with a lot of games on different chains. And what we say, like, to say if an ecosystem is good or not, we can divide the users into 2 different groups. Like the first group is the users who is just to pursue the incentives. They can go to like any ecosystem that provide them the incentives. So like another group is the users who is super loyal to one ecosystem and want to try every product on that ecosystem. So if there is a larger proportion of the latter of the users group, we will think, okay, this ecosystem is quite good, and also the games building upon it has a brighter future.
Maybe a controversial question, but do you think that Web3 gamers, let's just say, for example, they do get wrecked, and maybe it's a long road back.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you think that rich gamers are more loyal gamers, or do you think that, for example, going through that route, that divot actually strengthens the resolve of those players even more? Because I know that you'll always have some people that fall off based on price action, but as you said, if you go through kind of that trench, that fall, and then come back up, I mean, you basically married those people for life, right? It's like going through like a breakup and then getting back together again. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Because obviously there's the ecosystems, for example, where people do get rich early and they reinvest, as you said. And there's some people that, a lot of projects will, have a very tough kind of initial go, and it's a slow climb back. So what are your perspectives on that type of, what are your perspectives on that?
Should I take it first? I think it is really opportunistic for something like that to happen. Obviously, we never planned for that huge volatility. It just happened to be that some of the exchange that went under is one of our investors. But when it comes to the gaming users, I do feel like by geographic regions, it also differ quite a bit, right? For example, we have users that came from Binance, tried some of our games out, and they told us that if they lost $1 or $2 on a daily basis, they wouldn't be able to eat, right? So they're playing the game for exactly what you were just talking about, the productivity issue, where they're earning money from this game and they're making a living off of it, and they would get really upset if the price action is going under. Whilst when we look at the geographic region for, I would assume for a game like Godzilla, which I would assume you can talk a little bit more about, you have core European, Western market, some of their favorite game types is first-person shooter. They would be more willing to play high-quality game and spend money without thinking about the price action there. So I think that percentage, depending on the type of the game as well as which chain they launch on, also differ quite significantly. I would want to add that overall, I think most of the largest whales in a game that spend a lot of money, in the very beginning at least, they don't care as much about price actions. They believe the game for the future of it, and that's why they spend initially a very hefty amount. As the number of users grow, you have all of the different incentives coming in. But the very early days, that's why you want the 1,000 users that love your product. Yeah.
And also, I think like for the users who are loyal to an ecosystem, this is a quite special thing in Web2 world. Because in Web2 world, we say like the users are loyal to something, it's always to the product, rather than just loyal to a publishing brand or game developing brand. And so that is quite unique. And another difference is like in Web2, the users always choose genre over the publishing brands or the ecosystem. For example, I'm a mobile player. It's very hard for me to transfer to play football games or play RPG. But in Web3, there are many users, they choose the ecosystem before the genre. It's like if this is the game in this ecosystem, I can play any genre in this ecosystem. This is the huge difference. So I would say in these terms, like it's a quite special thing to be loyal to ecosystem, and also the loyalty is quite strong.
100%. Yeah, I think to your point, Chris, there are definitely certain demographics, especially in Europe, where the concept of, well, let's get into hyperinflationary mechanisms. So like a lot of the play to earn generation had a very simple structure where you do simple tasks, you earn a token, it's hyperinflationary, it's almost guaranteed to eventually get wrecked when the market is in a bearish state. But with the introduction of new velocity sinks and products that force a player to, maybe not force, but encourage a player to actually interact and earn items and assets that actually have intrinsic value based off of a very robust economy, I think is a much better approach to capture that type of audience. As Chris said, I mean, I worked very closely with Turkish communities early in my career, and people were loyal to the project regardless of genre, just based off of, okay, I can basically earn a steady income from this, and so I will actually educate myself, and I will educate others actually about this product, and eventually they actually fall in love with the product itself because it's actually changed their lives. So I think it's just an interesting perspective from both sides that eventually you can get there and build a dedicated community that will be educated on the product, whether it's they are product first or earning first. You can actually still get there. I wanted to actually, I was looking at my cards here, and there's actually one question that I think is pretty good, so I'm actually going to say it. This one's for both of you, but Leo, I know you like this one. How do user expectations regarding data ownership and control differ between Web 2 and Web 3 ecosystems, and what are the implications of that for user acquisition strategies?
This is the question is my favorite. Yeah, because what we are doing right now is like building the modular data layer, and also our mission and vision is to empower the users with their data self-sovereignty, to allow the users can own, control, and monetize their data. But if we talk about the difference between Web 2 and Web 3, I would say like for Web 2, people they don't really have the choice to have their data ownership. It's like when we use a new product or play a new game, we will say there are always a term that sharing a lot of the policies, and you have to click agree to use this product. And for most users, they don't even read this. And if you read this carefully, you will see that all the data generated in this product or in this game belongs to the developer or the publisher of the game or the product. So that is the situation in Web 2. And users do not have the choice to have the data ownership. But in Web 3, users have the awareness of the data ownership. And it can be divided into 3 different concepts. The first is own, control, and monetize. For own, it's like for the user acquisition in Web 3, we have to keep the users, they can actually own their data. which means use the privacy-preserving manner to make sure that only the users can access to the data, and also nobody else can get access to it or change the data. So this needs to be protected from the technical side. And the second thing is control. Like for the user acquisition in Web3, we need to make sure that users can decide like which part of my data want to be shared to which stakeholders. For example, even I share all my data, we say to Car Protocol, but it doesn't mean like Car Protocol can make any use of my data. But maybe I only want to share my Steam data to Car Protocol and only to the game developers who is also doing the AAA games on Steam. And this is the like range that I agree on my data sharing, which is the control. And lastly, and most importantly, is the monetize. That in Web2, like all the monetizations of the users' data is in the centralized gaming or like the product companies. But in Web3, the monetize should be on users. There needs to be a very transparent way for the user to know. For example, I play first-person shooters game and my data get acquired for user acquisition, for data analysis, and it's generate $1. And I can take $0.5 from this process. And this needs to be transparent, and also user can actually take a share from the monetization of the data. So own control and monetization need to be the important things for the Web3 acquisition in terms of the data ownership.
Yeah. So we don't necessarily build any product that is specific to data ownership. In terms of data ownership, I would actually rephrase a little bit from our perspective. I don't necessarily agree with Chris Dixon's read, write, and own. I think it's more so like read, write, and launch whatever assets that you want to, right? I think before the owning part, which is essentially a transfer of asset ownership from one party to another, there needs to be the creation of the asset. That is the core of everything that we do on top of this decentralized exchange, or ledger, sorry. I believe that majority of us are here because we can launch asset and then buy assets and then own assets. So the launching part is significantly more important for us as we are the fundamental layer that supports obviously a lot of these launches. And the term wealth effect, I believe, starts with the fact that we can launch a myriad of shitcoins, right? And when we think about games as an entertainment product, and then the token itself, it captures the attention, the entertainment value of it, then that is the ownership aspect that I'm thinking about. So I would say that each game with their product market fit or retention, as long as it is going up in the trajectory of having a higher retention, you would always get user to come back to read, write, and then buy or own your assets, given that you've launched one first, right? So from my perspective, when I first started out in this industry, I think the issue that I didn't think through was that, where's the asset? Now, having a chain, I think about that every single day. What is the primary asset that I'm going to issue? How do I get it listed? Which game am I going to support to the fullest extent and get it onto Binance, right? So to put it kind of straightforward, yeah.
Thank you, guys. There's a couple of things that I was thinking about, but both of you had some really interesting comments. I have two questions. I'll actually keep it simple. I'll start with one. So the concept of building all the hype kind of like pre-launch, kind of like asset creation, pre-existence versus posts when it's actually live. And I mean, we've seen kind of like the Instagram versus reality meme. We've also seen like the Web3 like kind of like hype, pre-hype versus like launch or MVP kind of meme. So, what are your thoughts on kind of the user behaviors pre and post launch, and how important is it to have that like MVP actually launch, no matter how kind of the quality might be in an MVP?
Yeah, so I would generally have a positive attitudes towards launching. I think the general sense of a Silicon Valley startup is to keep iterating and keep launching. It's just that previously in a traditional startup environment, every pivot you do is basically a fuck up, right? But now it's very normalized as this industry changes so fast. So for our project, initially, we launched our own NFT collection. We were profile picture collections. We didn't know anything about the infrastructure and the chain layer. So all of that is an aggregated effort through the last 2 years or so. So as long as the incentive is there for you to keep building, I think that is generally a positive thing. That being said, there is very easily chances of you to, for projects to be rugged. And I think that's because a lot of the incentive mechanisms within our industry is not there yet. So for example, there's no strict lockup that you can enforce as some of the project retail users. And once you buy into a project, sometimes there's no realistic timeline that can be controlled. So it actually tests the founding team's rhythm very, very hard as well. Sorry.
And also, I would like to share something about the product development, especially in terms of the Web2 gaming. In terms of this, like for Web2 gaming, there is a very clear roadmap for a game to be at the MVP stage, testing stage, and also the official launch stage. There are actually some reasons behind it. Like for the first, when the game have a MVP, we say the core gameplay version. It is to test like can this gameplay really attract the hardcore gamers from the beginning, and also to see like what is the future performance of the game. And after that, gonna be the technical test stage to see if the technical side it can really support this gameplay or not. After that, there are gonna be like a larger population to do the retention test or maybe do the payment test, and that is the like clear roadmap. But I think right now in Web3, there are some games is like starting from the MVP stage and maybe already ready to launch at that stage. So that makes sometimes the user experience is not good enough. So if you are not talking about the economics of the game, but just about how to build a good product, it has to be like, how to say, slow down and also step by step to polish the game.
Yeah, as we're really experiencing that over at Gunzilla because we've been building the game for 5 years now, and so the pressure for us to deliver an excellent product is so high. So we've had something that I like to call bullish delays because, I mean, you know how game development is. You never really deliver on time, but for us, because we're the first Web3 game to be listed on the PlayStation and Xbox store, we want to make sure that we get it perfect because our community has that expectation that the product will actually be good. And so in terms of any sort of value proposition for a token or any of our assets, for us, the game absolutely has to be good. We saw for a few other projects like Shrapnel, for example, went to market very quickly with a much less polished game. And so you saw kind of the benefits and like the drawbacks of that, right? People are actually playing the game, which is great. People are having fun, but you also see that like it's a less polished game, which, for some hardcore gamers is maybe not the best. So just like an interesting kind of, it's just an interesting thing to observe at the very least. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but there is one more question that I wanted to ask you guys, especially with Web3 user behavior in games. What about in-game gameplay and in-game behavior for Web2 versus Web3 users? What are your observations on that? Because like from my perspective, like when I was a teenager and playing Counter-Strike, just out of the pure passion of my heart, because you couldn't make any money back then. I was making like $50 a month as a professional player, but I was still playing like 10, 12 hours a day just for like the love of the game. And I'm wondering, if you guys have seen that kind of, same thing in Web3 gaming, or if you feel like it's, maybe happening for a different reason.
Yeah, actually, in Car, we did a lot of research on this, and we see that there's very interesting learning that if we see the overlap of Web2 and Web3, that the more knowledge the users have about Web3, the more likely this user is also a hardcore gamer in Web2, play the AAA single-player game. And the less knowledge the users have about Web3, like the more likely the users to be a casual or mobile gamer in Web2. So it's like for Web3 gamers, like naturally, they are the gamers who really want to conquer the difficulties and spend a lot of time learning the games. So I think that is the main difference.
Yeah, so I don't have a lot of time. Generally speaking, I think if you have an asset and the expectation to launch an asset, your retention will go way up, second day, 30 day, 7 day, because they're also like thinking about it as work. However, I think that also stays true to certain demographics in Web2 gaming. I used to play RuneScape, and one day when I was in middle school, high school, the player count for RuneScape dropped 25%. And we're really, really, surprised the miners all left the game. And then we later found out that one village in Venezuela, they didn't have electricity on that day. So there's a whole town playing this game for that same purpose. It's just that value transfer wasn't as easy. And I used to play League of Legends 15 hours a day in middle school. So I would say that for me and for a lot of gamers like me, the trading aspect and the outgame economy is just a part of the game, but it expands on top of the core gameplay. So if I really want to win in the Web3 game or in the Web3 ecosystem, it's because I played the core game loop, and that's fascinating to me. And then I realized there's a larger meta game that is called trading, and I want to win that one too. And that brings me a lot more incentive to keep playing as well. Yes.
100%. Okay, so we're out of time, so I just want to give Leo and Chris a chance to plug their socials or whatever they want to say. How do we find you guys?
I'll go first. Sonic SVM, the first Solana modular gaming chain.
Yeah, carve.io, which is our website, and also can search us on Twitter. Yeah.
So Gunzilla has about 25 Twitter accounts, so let me just list them off. We have at Play Off the Grid for our game, at Gunzilla Games for our studio, and at Gun by Gunz for our chain. And you can learn more about us at gunzillagames.com. I'll also be around the conference, the next few days. So we have a booth over there, E13. So if you guys want to chat more, you can find me over there. So Chris, Leo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for
Thank
listening.
you.